Ooh. Okay, and we're good. Okay, so second on the introduction to the Otiot Manspach. So we're gonna read Pach Otiot. So the most famous discussions about the Otiot Manspach are several. They instituted these letters. And the Bavli and the Yerushalmi have differing opinions on what is the interpretation of this teaching. That's the language of the rabbinic teaching. There were these people called the Tzofim, the seers, and they instituted these letters. So as both sources clarify, it doesn't mean literally that there were these people that once upon a time they woke up one morning and say we're going to change around the normal writing of the letters, that whenever these letters appear at the end of the word, they're gonna take a different form, because that form, the final letter form, is a tradition already from Sinai. What it means is that there was some incident involving with these people that they either reestablished them or gave us some type of creative, significant insight into the significance of these letters at some point in history. So onto that point, what is the significance of this? So of these Sofim characters, that's where the distinction between the Bavli and the Yerushalmi. So the Bavli says explicitly that yes, it's true that they were instituted by. That there was a tradition already from Sinai that the final letters take on this form. However, they were forgotten. And as Yoni pointed out in our last discussion, they were likely forgotten because, frankly, it's simpler to write these letters in the same form all the time, whether they become in the middle of the word or the end of the word or the beginning of the word, it doesn't matter. It's just complicated to switch the forms of four random letters just because they happen to come at the end of the word. So because probably that's how it happened, that with time people just forgot or they were lazy or something, that it wasn't common to use these final letter forms. And then later on, there were these prophetic figures who came and instituted and made a point of making it proper, like the proper writing form. Completely original story. And just to do a quick review, even though we discussed this last time, the Yerushalmi says is that these seers, these Tzofim, were actually people that lived in the rabbinic era, and they were small children, in fact. And it gives the following incident. Ma'aseh was too cold. As he pointed out, this is like the inverted snow day, right? It's like the kids show up and the teachers don't show up. Let's make our own lessons. Sometimes they appear in one form, and when they're at the end of the word, they take another form. So this was the project. And what did they come up with? This is the answer that they came up with. That each one of these letters are alluding to an aspect of the interaction between God and the Jewish people at Sinai. How is that? So the mem and the mem are alluding to ma'amar and ma'amar, the utterance and the utterance, the mouth, another mouth. So excuse me, we skipped one. I think I did this last time. I skipped the kaf, right? Kaf to kaf, right? From the hand to the hand. So what's the hand to the hand? Mikaf yado shel HaKadosh Baruch mitzadik letzadik, right? From the righteous one, referring to God, to the other tzadik, which is Moshe. God is called the trustworthy one, El Ne'eman, right? As the pasuk says at the end of Sefer Devarim, God the trustworthy one. To Ne'eman, to Moshe, which is also called the trustworthy one. We read this on Shabbat, right? B'chol beisi Ne'emanu, that Moshe is the trustworthy one. So these letters are alluding to this dual interaction between God on the one hand and the recipient on the other side. That God is the giver of the Torah, and there's a recipient of Torah on the other side. Now, this drasha that we see in the Yerushalmi parallels another fascinating drasha, which we did not do last time, which appears in an earlier source. I mean, there's some questions about the editing of this midrash, but the origins are quite early in a midrash called Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. In Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer in Parak Mem Zayin, it gives a very interesting take on these otiyot. So Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says the following.
And the only other letters that may fit is teacher to a teacher. So I don't know, it's right. They picked all the right letters because nothing else. No,
so that's the question. The question that form. So the idea is that there's a duality, there's an interaction going on, and studying the experience of the Jewish people. Let's just find the place over here. Is this the right parak? Parak Mem Zion. Otiyot Manspach. Sod Geulos. All of the letters that appear in a double form, they are all alluding to him with the kaf. How do we see that? With the letter Mem, Yitzchak was redeemed. Shenemar lech benun nigal Yaakov Avinu. Shenemar he comes on and he has to confront his brother. So he prays to God, Hatzileni na, save me.
Is there a dagesh in the nun?
Is there a dagesh in the nun? I don't know. I do not know. Pakod pakadati. I have surely remembered the Jewish people. This language of pakod pakadati appears already by Yosef. Yosef, before he died, told Gdolas Yisrael, and Sadi is going to be the letter the Jewish people will be redeemed in. Tzemach David Avdecha, Tzemach David, the sprouting of David is Mach. One of the names of Mashiach is Ish Tzemach, the sprouting. This particular pasuk is from Yeshayahu. Ish Tzemach Shemo Mitachtiv Yitzmach. From within will sprout the redemption. So this idea, again, this pattern of the beginning of a thing, which produces the final insight into what exactly is going on, I think is brought in the Sefer of the Maharal. When I came across source, by the way, not only is it germane to our conversation, but something clicked in my mind, which is a big theme throughout all these books that the Maharal has. There's like this theme, this reappearing theme in the Maharal. So says the Maharal. This is in Sefer Gevuras Hashem, which is the Sefer that the Maharal wrote primarily on the redemption from Egypt, but more broadly on the dynamic of redemption ha'olam, that God used the 22 letters to create the world. As it says in Sefer Yetzirah, Perek Beis, Mishnah Beis, Ubahem chokak tzuros ha'olam, that God used them to carve out the forms of the world. The Elu He ha'osios, these 5 letters, Manspach, Chokak bahem hageula shel ha'olam. So there's the creation of the world in its original state, and these five letters, meaning the augmented form of the final letters, they carve out the redemption of the world. Following that theme, Rabbi Rabbi was saying that these 5 letters, there's something unique about redemption that's associated with them. Because redemption is also part of the creation of the world. This is something that the Maharal discusses also the people and how they come out of that exile. That the idea is that Geula, the potential for redemption, is found within the creation itself, which is a uniquely Jewish idea, by the way. That the world was created with the potential to be redeemed. The world is not fallen. Yes, the world has problems because people come and mess it up. But that's not a problem with the world. That's a problem because people come and mess it up. Right? Within the world itself is the potential for the world to be redeemed. In fact, one could say that the world already was in this at least almost redeemed state when it was first created. Right? Within the creation is redemption. Huh? I'm talking about the world. The whole world, right? The natural creation, the people, all the creatures that live within it. You know? So the 22 letters are the forces, so to speak, that create the world, and that's the whole theme of the Reish Milan is talking about these different forces and how they interact with the creation. And these 5 letters are the letters that bring about the redemption of the world, because the redemption, Gam Ken Havayas Olam, is part of the creation of the world. Ki elu osios him osios pshutim. They're simple letters. Now, the exception to this, by the way, the exception to this is the os mem, which isn't called the mem. It's not called the mem pshuta. It's called the mem stuma, the closed mem. But what he means here is that the letters are simple in that there's no protrusions from the letters. They're all a smooth form. So either they're becoming like a straight line, like the nun is crooked and now becomes straight. Or the mem has these jagged protrusions, so to speak, but now becomes smooth all around. It's just a closed, smooth form. So the form of the letters is pashut. Pshitut, this is the theme that I was saying before, which I realized it clicked in my mind as I was reading this earlier today. This is a very powerful recurring theme throughout Gevuras Hashem, throughout all the writings of Maharal. Pshitus yesh bo geula. Simplicity is the root, is the secret of redemption. Redemption is found within pshitut, within simplicity. Like we will explain. Because something that is simple stands alone and independent. He is not cleaving on to anything else. He's not dependent on anything else. He stands alone. And this is the theme of the one who is redeemed. He is no longer clinging on or dependent on his master. This is not the case with someone who is enslaved. She'eino pashut. He is not simple. He is latched on to that which he on to anything else. Hu inyacherus, and that's what it means by being free. That's what it means by being free. The Maharal later on in Sefer Dvaras Hashem says that this is what it means, lachma anya, that you eat lachma anya on Pesach. Is an unbelievable interpretation of what that means. You know, most agadas, right? In the Maxwell Agada, it says lachma anya means poor man's bread, the lacham of the anya. This is what the ani eats. Poor people eat this. So everyone asks, why are we eating what poor people eat? And I just say to everyone's supposed to be, we're like royalty, we're reclining, we're doing all these things for royalty and freedom. Why are we eating the thing that the poor people eat? Says the Maharal, it's not lachma anya, the bread of the poor person. The bread is poor. The bread is poor. And he brings an incredible proof to this. What is it? What is matzah called that has additional ingredients in it? Additional ingredients. You add to matzah. What is the matzah called now? Matzah ashira. Matzah ashira is the halachic term to describe matzah that has additional ingredients beyond flour and water. If you mix fruit juice in it, you mix oil into it, you mix milk, whatever you mix into it, it's now called matzah ashira. That's what Chazal call this type of matzah. So there's matzah ashira, meaning you added extraneous stuff into it, and then there's the lechem oni, which is just bare basic nothing. There's even a custom to not put salt into the matzah, which, by the way, doesn't invalidate the matzah. If you put salt in matzah, it doesn't make it chametz. You're still yotze. But even that, there's a custom to not add it in because the whole point of the matzah is that it's lechem oni. The bread itself is poor, not poor in the sense of that it's poverty-stricken and has to go on welfare, but poor in the sense that it's simple. It has no additions. It's just it. It's just the bare basic bread. It's not dependent on anything else. It's just standing alone. It's pashut. That's the idea of pashtut. We're learning on Maseches Avos during Sudash Lishit. We're going to come across the teaching of Shmaya. Right, Shammai and Avtalion, the two Assyrian converts who became Gedolei Yisrael, the teachers of Shammai and Hillel. So on the Mishnah of the teaching of Shmaya of Ahavas Hamalacha, that a person should love work. So says the Maharal, he quotes from the pasuk in Mishlei, which is brought in the final Mishnah in Shas in Maseches Uktzin, the Mishnah in the pasuk in Mishlei, Lahanchil Ohava Yesh, to give to my beloved Yesh. What does Yesh mean? Yesh means existence. Substance. Yesh. Says the Maharal, what is yesh? It means that the person is able to be self-sufficient and stand alone by himself. And that's the secret of Hamalacha. The person should love work. He quotes in the Gemara in Nedarim at Rabbi Yehuda, right? The great Yehuda Bar Ilai, right? The Bar Plukta of Rabbi Meir that appears in the Mishnah. It says that when Rabbi Yehuda would go into the Beit Midrash, he would insist on carrying his own chair into the Beit Midrash. He wouldn't let his students carry his chair. He says, Gadol hamalacha shemevi tiferes lo oseh, right? Great is work because it brings splendor to the one who does it. Now, what is that? It's not like some, Jewish version, God forbid, of like the Protestant work ethic or something like that. What's the idea? Although I'm not putting that down. I'm not saying that that's wrong either. But what I'm saying is that the idea is slightly different. I think it's a little bit deeper. What it's saying is that the person that relies on others for things, even to do simple things for them, there's an element that he is mishuabad. He's now reliant. He's not standing alone. He's not pashut. So this idea of pashtut, of independence, of standing alone in a state of complete self-reliance, that is the state of Lahanchil Ohavai Yesh, that God gives His beloved Yesh, a sense of existence, self-sufficiency, right? It is a taste of what it is to be like the Creator, because the Creator, as the Rambam opens up, the very first halacha of the Yad HaChazaka, that he said Yesod HaYesodos, the foundational element of the entire Torah, is Sheyesh Matsui. There is an existence that is emet, that is true, i.e. God. There is a true existence which is not dependent on anything else. It's completely self-sufficient, right? It's the perpetual mobily of existence. There's nothing else fueling it. It's not dependent on anything. It doesn't need to take from anything else. It just exists on its own accord. This idea of the yesh, of the pashtut, the simplicity of not being mishuabad, of not being in service of anything else, is a taste of what it means to be the Creator. Now, obviously, I'm going to insert this parenthetically. There's another side to this coin. It's that all human beings, all all creatures, from the fact that they are created beings, are somewhat dependent on something. We're all dependent on something. We can't live without food and water. We can't function without shelter. Even socially, we're dependent on things. So there's always an element of dependence. But the idea is that that dependence, it shouldn't come in a needy type fashion, right? The relationships that we have should be exactly that. And we've talked about this right throughout the letters, that the idea of relationship is exactly that. It's a give and take. It's not a neediness. It's not right like I'm clinging to this thing because I absolutely need it, and right, I'm not going to get it any other way. Right? It's a give and take. Right? It's a masao matan. Right? A give and take. But the idea of being right, this pashtut, the simplicity of being in a state of self-sufficiency, of omeid ba'atzmo, of not being meshuabad, of not being reliant and dependent on the thing, is geula itself, is redemption. Shiabud malchuyot, right? Even in a purely halachic context, the word for a lien, like a financial lien, like, right? You take out a loan and you use your house as a lien, or you use your car as a lien. So what's the term in halacha? There's a shiabud. There is a shiabud now on this house. You took out a loan, you're using your house as collateral, there's a shiabud. Your house is subservient. Like, it's not completely yours. There's partial, it's like the Ritva famously says in his commentary, right? This is Rav Yom Tov ben Avram, who lived in Spain about 700 years ago. There's a famous section in his commentary on Kedushin. He says that a shiabud in halacha, a lien, is chetzi kinyan. It's like half an acquisition. It's not fully an acquisition, it's half an acquisition. Meaning, you signed your house over as a collateral, it's like you don't fully own it anymore. It's partially someone else's. A shiabud is like, it's not good. It's like someone else taking over. To the extent that that we are meshuabad, that we are subservient to things, we're not in our own reshus. We're not in our own possession. And the pshitut, the simplicity, is the geula itself. This is the sod, by the way, of Rabbi Nachman's teaching about pashtut, about simplicity. This is the secret. People often mistake it as simplicity and not sophisticated, although there is something to say about that as well. But it's not necessarily a lack of smarts, or even a lack of wealth and possessions. It's what? Yes, it's epitomized in Emunah Pshuta. It's epitomized in Emunah Pshuta. And how is that? Because he contrasts Emunah Pshuta to the faith of the philosophers. Right? He's always calling out like the Spanish philosophers, and the Rambam chief among them, that try to prove the existence of God. Like, show me a proof. Oh, you show me a proof. Okay, now I got. Meaning it's dependent on this thing. Right? So he points out, and if the scientists discover that really the orbits of the planets aren't going by themselves, that we can actually understand the scientific principles behind that, now you don't believe in God anymore. I mean, like this is what people said 800 years ago. Well, clearly God is controlling the universe because they see that the planets are spinning around the heavens and no one's moving them, so it must be God. Until Newton came along and said, well, no, they're moving because that's just how things work, right? Unless something's stopping them, they're going to move. So now you're lost your faith in God. It's like your faith in God is dependent on the current state of the science of physics. So it's meshuabad, right? It's not pashut. It's not pashut, right? It's meshuabad to something else. Yeah. So this idea of these osios being the allusion to the core principle of geula, of pashtut, of being independent, omeid la'atzmo. You're in your own domain. You're not being subjugated by anything outside of you. This is what these letters come to say, and this is the general principle of these letters. And now we're going to jump into the specific themes that are expressed in every one of the 4 letters.
Not being subjugated by something outside of us is.
Excuse me, 5 letters. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
No, it's all good. Not being subjugated by something outside of us is in line with Rabbi Nachman's definition of pashut.
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah,
as we just explained, when Rabbi Nachman talks about emunah pshuta, it means faith that is not based on the necessity of something else. Right? Because that's not emunah pshuta. That's emunah that's meshuabad. Right? It's like Chazal said, another well-known Mishnah in Maseches Avos. The ahava teluya b'davar, love that's dependent on something else. And once that thing goes away, so the love goes away. Yeah, it's teluya b'davar. So we want an ava that's right, that's free. That's right. That's right. That's the ava of geula. It's right. It's love just because it is. It's not dependent on anything else. So similarly, we as beings are meant to be, to the full extent possible, we're meant to be right, stand alone and not dependent excuse me, dependent on anything else. I would say, just going back on that point, it occurred to me now, the idea that ultimately all creatures are dependent on something, because we're not God. God is the only thing that is completely independent in an ultimate sense. But the idea of dependence, as the Gemara in Baba Basra says very beautifully, the person in need that comes and asks for tzedakah is really ultimately doing the favor to the person who gives the tzedakah, not vice versa. We think that you give tzedakah, you're doing the guy a favor. No, he's doing you a favor. Really, he's doing you a favor because he's giving you an opportunity. And that is how we relate to our dependencies, our needs. The fact that we're lacking, the fact that we're not completely independent in an ultimate sense, that is the opening for us to be in connection and in relationship. Because if we were completely independent, there'd be no possibility for that. That's the idea. And if you want to take that a step even further, you could possibly phrase this. I don't want to sound heretical, but this is already based on the famous idea that the Ramchal develops in the beginning of Derech Hashem as to why God created the world. So, as he famously phrases it, Derech HaTov Lehitiv, it is the nature of the one who is good to do good, and so he created the world in order to do good. So one could rephrase that possibly, I'm not saying this definitively, but one could rephrase that idea that God needs the world in order to be able to give. If there's nothing outside of him, then there's nothing there to give. So that could be a side, a possible side Kabbalah Yachol, that there is a need, so to speak, for something outside. Anyway, so we'll jump into Os Chaf. These Osios are very, very short because they just kind of build off of the themes that we already learned in the letters themselves, right, in the primary form of the letter, and then he just gives like just the Manspach, broader Manspach theme.
These ideas help us understand what the experience of Gula would be like. I mean,
Yeah. Yes.
We talk about Gulio, so we don't have that independence from other countries. Is there also something within the nation of Israel that the society changed and that we're not all working and depending on this and that and trying to, in other words, is there some kind of, monetary independence that people don't have to hustle all the time and be dependent on the goodwill.
Absolutely. The Rambam says in Hilchos Tshuva that the reason that all the prophets yearn for the Mashiach is not because of the physical or material gains of that time, although those are prophesied that there will be physical and material gains of the Messiah. But it's because through those physical and material gains, we will all be free to just learn Torah all the time and think about God. That's why they wanted Mashiach. Now you can just spend all day just thinking about God, not having to do anything. I think there are some people that might take issue with that there could be a semblance of the natural world still around. Right? It might be nice to have a variety of activities, not just learning in the Beit Midrash all day. I mean, you can take a walk in Gan Sacher and see the giant grapes growing and the thing and stuff. But yes, that is ultimately the idea that the shiabud malchuyot, as the famous statement of Shmuel in the Gemara in Sanhedrin, which the Rambam also quotes over there in Hilchos Tshuva, is that ein bein olam hazeh li'amos ben David ela shibud malchuyos bilvad. That the difference between this era and the time of Mashiach is the shiabud, is the subjugation element. So that subjugation is, I mean, it's already, compared to what our, great grandparents were experiencing. We're light years ahead. It's moving in the right direction. Mizran Hashem, we'll continue moving. So we're going to learn the first one of the Osios Pshutos, and yes, as Yoni pointed out, we're now going to learn how each one of these letters hones in on a specific element of the redemptive state, of what it looks like to be in a redeemed state of these letters, as opposed to the natural progression, the forces that formed the world as such as opposed to the as opposed to the forces that bring about the redemption of the world.
You look at the Industrial Revolution, and AI is all things that are moving towards.
So this is something that I've heard a lot. It's a pretty good theory. It's a pretty good theory, right? That these things are bringing us more and more levels of freedom, essentially. But freedom, I mean, right? This could be a freedom in the bad sense and a freedom in the good sense. If it's just a freedom from, then all the things that people used to do are no longer relevant. So that's not necessarily a good thing, because people just won't have anything to do. But if it's a freedom to, then that's a good. All the technological progression from the Industrial Revolution until now, that's been the effect, right? People working 12, 13, 14-hour days. And now that would be crazy for people to work that much during the day, because technology speeds everything up. That's right. That's what technology does. It's right. It's a force multiplier. So how much of that can we do? I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question. Like, what's the upper limit of force multiplying through technology? I don't think anyone knows the answer to that question.
Cut your hours so much, it forces you to get 2 jobs.
To get what?
2 jobs.
Right. Exactly. You're sitting around with nothing to do. Yeah. It's terrible. So kaf pshuta. So just to do a 2-sentence review of the kaf of the primary kaf. We talked about the kaf, and the kaf is a recurring letter that appears in the forms of many other letters. We see the kaf is in the lamed, the kaf is in the mem, in the kuf also. Right, it reappears a lot, because the theme of the kaf is a very fundamental theme, and the kaf is the theme of the kaf ma'oznayim, the balancing. Anything that requires finesse or any level of sophistication already requires a balancing. It requires a balancing. We talked about, I believe at the time, we talked about the difference between moving something with one hand and moving something with 2 hands, right? The contra force that you give with your 2 hands allows you to be more stable with something, holding something with 2 hands. So there's a balancing act that's done with the kaf, just like the kaf ma'oznayim literally means the hands of the scale, and it balances the thing. So too kaf is the ability to interact with complex things that require very, very precise harmonization and synchronization. So that's the kaf in its primary form. So what's the kaf pshuta in its redeemed form? Tazkirenu et otzmat hakoach hapula kefit. So it reminds us, it throws us back to the power of the kaf. Lo kamoshihi kfufa, but not in the form of it being bent over. Kfufa literally means bent over. Kaf kfufa means the bent kaf, the primary form of the kaf. It looks like a half a circle. Umugbelet bigvulot pa'al hakapayim, which is alluding to the constricted form of the kaf. Betochen hamif'al hechel ala gvul v'tzimtzumav, that within the context of acting, there needs to be very strong boundaries and tzimtzum and constriction, right? Which makes a lot of sense. If the whole idea is balance and high levels of calibration, it's almost like the definition of tzimtzum, of constriction. It requires constriction because you want the thing to move, 3 millimeters to the left and not 4 millimeters to the left, because that 4th millimeter will make the whole thing break. So there's a very powerful constricting element to the kaf in its regular form. So rather, what is the kaf pshuta coming to allude to? The power of acting out or producing, hora'at hakochaniut ha'atzuma hapshuta, which has been simplified, meaning hayecholet lahavot havayot le'ein tachlit ve'ein gvul, the ability to create without any boundaries and without any constriction, le'ein aroch, to an infinite extent, v'mispar in number, midah, and in measure, mishkal ve'erech in weight and in value, le'ein monea, without any monea is something that is preventing, right? Yeah. The pashtut v'hamon ta'atzumata, anything that is preventing its spreading out to its full force of potential. Ubeor gvuratahi mizrachat mikocha bekaf hapshuta hamagbelet et hamif'al bihitkatzvutav mitzido. Let's read that last line one more time because that was very complicated. Ubeor gvurata, in the light of its strength. Ubeor gvurata, in the light of its strength. Mizrachat mikocha, it arises from within the kaf pshuta hamagbelet et hamifal bit katzrotav mitzido. The ability for the actions, the mifal, the producing, to transcend its earlier constraints. So this is what came to mind when I was thinking about this. Whenever you learn anything complicated, and I think we've brought up this theme before, that anything complicated, any complex series of actions in the beginning and even in more advanced stages, you need to take things slow. You see anyone working like a nuclear reactor or anything like that, things that you don't want to mess up. So people are moving very, very slow. They don't want to make any mistakes. They want to do everything where all those movements have been so complex movements without. It's like it's as if they're not even thinking about it. Playing the piano is a really good example. I don't play the piano, but like watching expert people play the piano, it's like the way that those fine movements have been so thoroughly the measurement, but it's pshuta. It's now opened up. There's no constraints anymore. It's all a fine-tunedness with no constraints. It's like a stira mina yuve. It's like a right. It's like not an irony, but a paradox, right? That on the one hand, it's fine-tuned constraints that even a small deviation will wreck the entire thing. But those movements have been so thoroughly integrated that it's just pashut. It's completely open now. So that's the redeemed form of the kaf. That the kaf, right? In what way?
Because there's so many things he has to do. And he has to move quick. He has to be on his feet.
Yeah.
And his kaf and kohen.
There you go. Yafet, alluding to the Kohen. Yeah, like the Gemara says in a few places, that there are a few types of avoda. The flour from a bread offering, there's a piece of it that's meant to be burnt on the mizbeach. So how much is taken off in order to be burnt on the mizbeach? It's called a kometz. What's a kometz? You stick your hand into the dough and you skim off the amount that can fit into 3 fingers over here. And how do you get off the excess? You skim off with your thumb on this side, and you skim off with your pinky on this side, while holding the thing in your 3 fingers over here. That's one of the avodas kasher sheba mikdash, the difficult avodas. Yeah, so that's considered like uniquely difficult. Not consider all the other stuff of like carrying an ox up 30 meters. That's okay. That's easy. Like carrying a dead ox up to the top of the altar, that's fine. But the thing with the fingers, that's avoda kasha, right? But so it's like you said, like all these things are not particularly easy. Right? It takes a long time. It takes even the Kohen Gadol, who's ostensibly pretty experienced, if he got to that rank, he has probably a lot of experience, right? But the Kohen Gadol, before every Yom Kippurim, he has to have a week where he's just in the Beis Hamikdash. He doesn't leave. He's there for a whole week. It's like he's practicing basically. He's got to get ready. Right? So to achieve that level of mastery, where it's a kaf pshuta, it's the balance and synchronization, but it's not synchronization that constrains. It's now open and completely flowing. So it's the redeemed kaf, the kaf of Geula. Bezrat Hashem. Next week we'll go into Osmem.